What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Primetime Sports Podcast, hosted by Joey Mailari. So today, going to give an update on the NFL and then talk about some baseball at the end of the episode, just catch up on some storylines across each of the two leagues. We'll start off with the NFL. There was a tough injury this past weekend to a team that was doing really well to begin the year, and then now the last 5 games or so, they've really started to struggle, and that's the Indianapolis Colts. Daniel Jones, their starting quarterback, suffered a torn Achilles in last Sunday's loss against Jacksonville. This is a Colts team that at one point was 7-1, but they've lost 4 of the last 5 games and are currently 8-5 and out of the AFC playoff picture the way things stand right now, which is pretty crazy. This team to start the year was excelling offensively. The defense was playing well. The offense was amazing to begin the year. And then the last 5 games or so, they've really started to struggle. And now with Daniel Jones being hurt, the offense isn't going to look any better, I don't think. I do like Phillip Rivers coming back. I think that's a cool story and all. But obviously, I think their best chance of winning a Super Bowl was with Daniel Jones being healthy. Unfortunately, the last 3 weeks or so, Daniel Jones is playing through a fractured fibula, which he's a really tough player, and he has shown that each and every season of his career. Playing through a fractured fibula did not surprise me at all. I know Daniel Jones is a competitor, and he wants to do anything he can to try to help his team win. So even if he has to play through an injury and sacrifice his ability to run and move around the pocket, he'll do that if he thinks he can go out there and play. So he tried to obviously push himself the last few weeks, and then this past week, unfortunately, did suffer a torn Achilles, which I was devastated. He was having a really good year, 19 passing touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 3 fumbles lost, an 8-5 record, a 68% completion percentage, which was 7th best in the NFL, 5 rushing touchdowns, 3,265 total yards, and a 100.2 passer rating, which was tied for 7th most in the NFL in the first 13 games of the season. He also had a 238.5 passing yards per game average, which was 8th in the NFL, and then also had 24 total touchdowns, which is 8th in the NFL, ahead of Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Jordan Love, and also C.J. Stroud, which I know obviously those numbers now will change. They're all healthy right now currently and have 4 games left to play, so they'll probably finish ahead of Daniel Jones this year in total touchdowns. And I know some of them did already battle injuries this year, like Justin Herbert, like Lamar Jackson. But it is pretty impressive, the numbers that Jones put together this year in 13 games in Indianapolis. He had 3,101 passing yards, which was 7th in the NFL. Just a really good season for him, and he really revitalized a fan base that was definitely down on the franchise heading into this year. They've had basically a revolving door at quarterback the last 10 years. Since 2014, they've had a different starting quarterback each and every year, it seems. You have in 2014 Andrew Luck, and then once Andrew Luck did retire after the 2018 season, Jacoby Brissett was the quarterback in 2019, then Phillip Rivers in 2020, Carson Wentz in 2021, Matt Ryan in 2022, alongside Nick Foles. In 2023, Gardner Minshew and Anthony Richardson. 2024 was Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco. And then this year was Daniel Jones. And now adding back into the mix is Phillip Rivers. He's going to unretire and go back to playing football, and he just signed with the Colts practice squad. I'll get to that in just a minute. But if you look at this Daniel Jones season, did put up really good numbers, and he also, at the same time, not only revitalized the franchise, but it also revived his career as well. And I know it won't be an easy road back. It's going to be a long recovery process, and this is a guy that already has had a lot of injuries in his career, a torn ACL, now a torn Achilles, has had some bad neck injuries, some concussions. He's suffered a lot of injuries in his career, but he is one tough player for sure. And definitely, I think a lot of people have to respect his game, especially considering there weren't really many expectations around this franchise or Daniel Jones this year. I've always been the highest on Daniel Jones, and I was rooting for Indianapolis this year because of him. I also thought Jonathan Taylor was going to have a big-time bounce-back year because he showed a lot of potential last year in the last half of the 2024 season. And then in the first half of this season in 2025, he was electric for the Colts. Daniel Jones was clicking with that offense. Shane Steichen looked really good as a head coach, which I still think he is a good head coach. It's just now they're battling some injuries. Daniel Jones going down is definitely a tough one to overcome. They did make a tough trade, I thought, trading for Sauce Gardner. When that trade happened, I didn't love the move. I didn't think Sauce Gardner was worth 2 first-round picks. But obviously the Colts were in a position to try to contend and try to win a Super Bowl right now. And if cornerback was their issue, they felt like, you know what, we can go out and spend 2 first-round picks because we might be getting the guy that can really bring us over the top defensively. Now with Daniel Jones going out, I think expectations are going to be a little bit lower for this team right now the rest of the season. With that being said, though, nobody really saw this team being a 7-1 team at one point, being a playoff contender, and Daniel Jones having a really good bounce back year. I have stayed with Daniel Jones every step of the way, and I always believed in him, and I've stayed believing him. And even up to this point now, I still believe Daniel Jones is a Super Bowl winning quarterback. Would have been great to have that opportunity this year, but now obviously with him going down, that won't be the case now for the 2025 season. But in the future, I still believe Daniel Jones can be and will be a Super Bowl winning quarterback. I know a lot of people disagreed with me in the past about that, and a lot of people I've had arguments with in the past and disagreements with about it. But the way I see it is Daniel Jones, when he was in New York, was not given the opportunity to succeed. The offensive line was poor. He didn't get a wide receiver one until his 6th year with the Giants. Then you add in there was a revolving door at head coach. The same with offensive coordinator. There were new head coaches, new playbooks, new systems, new schemes. Each and every year it seemed like for Daniel Jones. And he never could really find his footing in those schemes, because how can you do that when every single year there's no continuity? Players-wise, and then obviously coaching from the head coaching position, and then even at the offensive coordinator position, he had a lot of turnover, it seemed like, every 2 years or so. And then he also battled some unfortunate injuries, and the fan base just turned against him. And really they shouldn't have, because at the end of the day, look at the Giants now. They had Saquon Barkley, Daniel Jones, Xavier McKinney, Leonard Williams, Julian Love, all on the same roster at one point. All of those guys end up leaving, and they end up being better players and better situations on other teams, and especially winning teams. Look at the Eagles. They won the Super Bowl last year. The Colts right now are 8-5 with Daniel Jones. The Seahawks have Leonard Williams and Julian Love. They've looked really good. And then you look at what the Packers are doing right now with Xavier McKinney. They're still a team that can win the Super Bowl this year. So a lot of players do end up leaving New York, and they end up being in a better situation. And I think that just means that the Giants' culture right now is not what they want it to be. And I know a lot of people pointed fingers and blamed Daniel Jones for why the Giants were struggling. That should not have been the case. Daniel Jones was not the issue in New York. And now you see that once he goes to a team that had some competency around him, whether it's at the offensive line, which was really good in Indianapolis this year, or a good run game with the good offensive line and good weapons at the wide receiver position, added in with a quarterback-friendly system, a competent and stable head coach, and a system that he could learn, and a fan base that supported him. And partly because the fan base was down on the team, so I think there weren't really many expectations. So I don't think anybody was really saying in the offseason that Daniel Jones was going to ruin and hurt their chance of winning a Super Bowl. People were just down on the Colts, and that's probably why at the end of the day a lot more fans bought back into the franchise, because they weren't really high on them heading into the year. And then once they started playing great at the beginning of the year and they were 7-1 to begin the season, more and more people bought into the Colts and started believing in Daniel Jones. And that's why there's a lot of support from that fan base for Daniel Jones. And I'm always going to wish the best for Daniel Jones. I think he's a great player. I think he's a great teammate. If you look at what happened after he suffered that torn Achilles on Sunday, he came out of the locker room with the boot on his foot and sat on the sidelines with the Colts to support them as they were down 31-13 in the pouring rain in a divisional game. That's an important divisional game against Jacksonville. He found a way to still go out there and support his teammates. Even though he knew his season was over with, he decided to still go out there and support his guys. Supporting his teammates in the pouring rain while knowing his season was over with is something that Daniel Jones should get respect for. Sometimes guys get hurt and they stay in the locker room, but that wasn't the case there for DJ. He just stayed supporting his guys no matter what, through and through. Even though they were down 31-13, he was still there to support Riley Leonard and the rest of his teammates. And if you look at what he's done for that Colts team, like I said, he revitalized the fan base and definitely brought a lot of promise. And I think next year, I know it's going to be a long recovery now in the offseason for him, but he will have the option to get a new contract this offseason. We'll see what that ends up looking like. But I know a lot of people thought his career was over with after the Giants got rid of him, but he did just show that he still can play in this league and also can still be a winning player in this league as well. And that at the end of the day, when you can support him with a good offensive line and some weapons, he could definitely make some magic happen. And I know a lot of quarterbacks, and most quarterbacks do not have a perfect situation, and I completely understand that. Daniel Jones did not have a perfect situation, and no other quarterbacks necessarily have a perfect situation. But when you can give Daniel Jones some competent pieces and some stable pieces around him, you will see him succeed like you saw this year with Indianapolis. So even though this year didn't end the way that Daniel Jones wanted it to, he had a great year and has a lot to be proud of. And I've stayed supporting Daniel Jones every step of the way, and I'm going to continue to do so. Now shifting over to Phillip Rivers, who just signed with the Colts practice squad this week. He had a workout with them on Monday night. There is a chance that he starts this Sunday over Riley Leonard against the Seattle Seahawks. Rivers' high school football program that he coaches runs the same offense as Shane Steichen's does in Indianapolis. So Steichen and Rivers both have some continuity. They talked often during the fall of this year about their offensive scheme and their playbook. So there is continuity here for Rivers when he steps back into the huddle. It is a great story and definitely something I'm rooting for. I'm hoping to see him succeed. The one thing is, though, he is old now, though, 44 years old. He did play 16 games last in the 2020 NFL season, where he did play for the Colts. Played in 16 games that year with an 11-5 record, 11 wins, 5 losses, 4,169 passing yards, 24 passing touchdowns, and 11 picks. He still does hold NFL Hall of Fame eligibility if he does remain in the practice squad. However, though, if he is signed to the active roster and plays for the Colts and is active on game day, he will have to wait another 5 years after the last game he plays in the NFL. But he is 44 years old. I'm not really sure what to expect here. I think it will be a tough transition for him, especially when you're getting hit and you haven't been hit in an NFL game in 5 years. I think that's going to be tough on him, and I think he sees a chance to potentially get this team to the playoffs, to have a chance to win a Super Bowl. And Rivers was a good quarterback for them in 2020 before he retired, but being out of the game now for 5 seasons and now stepping into a tough schedule to end the year, going up against Seattle right away is not an easy opponent to go against. We'll see how things go if he does end up starting this Sunday for the Colts against the Seattle Seahawks. I'm not really too sure what to think. I'm going to be rooting for him and hope he does great, but I do think this will be tough for him to step into an NFL season so late into the year, and then obviously having not played for 5 seasons, it will be tough, but I am rooting for him to do big things. I wouldn't be shocked if he does well because he's always been a good quarterback and has a very good IQ for the game, but I do think when you haven't played for 5 years and you're probably out of game shape and you obviously haven't been hit in 5 years, I think it's going to be a little bit difficult for him stepping into, a huddle right away and then getting right off to trying to make plays for a team that is trying to work their way out of in the hunt race into the playoff mix. So now I'm going to move on to talk about Shedeur Sanders really quick, who shined this past Sunday despite the Browns losing to Tennessee. Sanders did have a great game, 364 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and an interception with 3 rushes for 29 yards and a rushing touchdown. The Browns were down by 1 point and decided to go for 2 to try to win the game late in the fourth quarter, but it was a Fields Wildcat play to potentially get the lead. Wasn't really a great play design and obviously was not a great decision when you look at it now with their decision to go for 2. Sanders did put them in a position to win this game, and I know it's against a Tennessee defense. It isn't great, especially a Tennessee team that has really struggled on the year, and they haven't been good. But Sanders did look good in this game. He did show a lot of promise and showed a lot of poise in the pocket in this game. The Browns were down in the fourth quarter. He threw a potential game-tying touchdown pass with, the extra point pending with under a minute to go, but the Browns ended up deciding to go for 2 and obviously ended up missing it, and that cost them. But he did play great, had a great touchdown pass in the clutch to Harold Fannin Jr., a guy I was a big fan of in college, a guy that I was very high on in the NFL draft, and a guy that I expected to do big things in the NFL, and now we're obviously seeing him have a real great breakout year as a rookie for the Browns. Shedeur Sanders is a guy that I wasn't necessarily the highest on in the NFL draft process. I thought it was concerning that a lot of people said his interviews weren't great, and I thought there was definitely something about his attitude that I felt like NFL teams would try to stay away from. But now that I look at him play, and I see the situation he's in, and I see a lot of the criticism he gets, I'm rooting for Shedeur Sanders. I know I was critical of him before in the NFL draft process, and I didn't know if he would be a franchise quarterback. But now that everybody's been against him and kind of rooting against him, I've been rooting for Shedeur Sanders and rooting for him to succeed. I was really happy to see him have a really good game this past Sunday. And also, one thing I want to mention is Perfect Timing is a really good song as well. I know a lot of people gave him some backlash when he put out that rap song, a few years ago when he was at Colorado. But Perfect Timing is a good song, and I'm happy to see him doing well there for the Browns this past Sunday. He's now the only player since the NFL merger to have 350 passing yards and 4 total touchdowns in a single game within their first 5 starts of a rookie season, and that's a stat from CBS Sports. He also joins Joe Burrow as the only rookie in NFL history to record 350 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown in a single game, and that's a tweet from Real Sports app on Twitter. That's really impressive, though, all of those statistics there. And then you look at the numbers overall, 4 total touchdowns and just about 400 yards in the game. Very impressive game for him. And I know people are going to say, well, look at the team he's playing against, and Tennessee's not great. I completely understand that. But he did have a historic game when you look at no other rookie quarterbacks did what he did in a single game within their first 5 starts as a rookie in NFL history. It was a really impressive match there for him, and I'm happy to see him succeed. And like I said, I'm going to be rooting for Shedeur to do big things there in Cleveland. I think he could be their franchise quarterback. And I know a lot of people were critical of him in the NFL draft process, and I was definitely someone that was critical of the concern I had around him not really interviewing well. There was definitely a concern there, but I do see him now, and he seems like a guy that brings a lot of positive energy, and he's confident in his game. I think that's what you need when you're having a franchise quarterback. You need a guy that's confident in his game that can try to uplift a team and also uplift a franchise that's had a lot of losing seasons recently. I'm hopeful that Shedeur can be the guy there for the Cleveland Browns. Now moving on to the MLB, I'm going to talk about Kyle Schwarber, who just signed a 5-year, $150 million deal with $30 million per year with the Philadelphia Phillies. A new contract there for him to stay put in Philadelphia. He had 56 home runs this past season, a .240 batting average, 132 RBIs, and a .928 OPS. In 4 years at Philly, he has 187 total home runs, 484 RBIs, a .226 batting average, and an .856 OPS. He's averaging 47 home runs and 107 RBIs per season in Philadelphia. That is just a bat you can't lose in your lineup. I would have loved to see him come back to Boston, but it was just very unlikely that he would ever leave Philly, especially considering he's so important in that lineup, and they were willing to give him $30 million a year on a 5-year deal. It seems like the Red Sox are reluctant to give long-term contracts over 2 or 3 years. I know they gave Alex Bregman that 3-year deal they ended up opting out of, and now we'll see what happens with him in free agency. But there was a report today from Sean McAdam of Mass Live that the Red Sox are very hesitant to give long-term contracts, and I think that's going to hurt them in free agency. Top free agents are going to get 4 or 5 year contracts no matter what. That's just the way the game of baseball is nowadays. Even if they're 30 or 31 years old, guys are going to get 5+ year deals in free agency if they're very valuable. And if teams are in a position to try to win right now, they're going to give them that money knowing that they probably won't be as great or as productive in years 3, 4, and 5. They really just want them for those first couple years. And then, anything after that would just be a bonus. I do think the Red Sox being reluctant to give long-term deals is going to hurt them in free agency. I do think the situation with Alex Bregman is tough right now because if you do end up not getting Alex Bregman back, and let's say you don't get Bo Bichette or Kyle Tucker, for example, what do the Red Sox do? What's their counter move in free agency or a trade? Which they do have some good prospects and young players that they could make a trade and go get somebody if they want to do that. But I also think at the same time, if there's a free agent out there that you can go and get, like Kyle Schwarber at one point or Pete Alonso before they both signed deals this past week, it would have been really nice to add those guys to the lineup. And like I said, though, the Phillies weren't going to let him leave their lineup. You just can't let a bat that's been that productive over the last 4 years leave your lineup. He's averaging, as I said, 47 home runs and 107 RBIs per season in Philadelphia. You got to look at this, though. In his previous 7 seasons before playing for the Phillies, so from 2015 to 2021, he averaged just 21.9 home runs per season and just 50 RBIs per season. And then you look at his per 162 average. He did average more than that, though, 37 home runs per 162 games and 85 RBIs per 162 games as well. So the averages were good. He did miss some games with injuries over the years, and that definitely was part of the problem. But nobody ever saw him hitting over 47 home runs per season for the Philadelphia Phillies in a 4-year stretch. He's averaging 48 home runs per 162 games with the Phillies and 112 RBIs per 162 games in Philadelphia. Like, those are just crazy numbers. And even though the Red Sox did let him walk in free agency, and at the time they still had J.D. Martinez, you still had Xander Bogaerts, there was still a lot of talent on that team, and they still thought, okay, J.D. was going to be our DH for the next 3 or 4 seasons. Obviously, things didn't really work out there. After Schwarber leaves, J.D. started to fall off, and they moved on from him. But nobody saw Schwarber having this much production after he left Boston. And I know at the end of the day, in hindsight, yes, the Red Sox should have kept him. They should have never let him leave. But I don't know if anybody saw him averaging 47 home runs per season and also staying healthy for the past 4 seasons in Philadelphia. That's something that really wasn't the case his whole career. He struck out a lot in the past, did have some power and showed a lot of power potential and could hit home runs, but there was concerns with injuries and also strikeouts as well. And now you see when he gets to Philadelphia, has really been healthy for the most part and a very productive hitter for them. It just didn't make sense for them to let him walk in free agency, and that's why he re-signed on a 5-year deal with the Phillies. In 2021, though, between playing for the Nationals and the Red Sox, he did hit 32 home runs with 71 RBIs and a .928 OPS in 113 games. Like I said, though, there were definitely some injury concerns there, and I don't know if anybody ever saw him averaging 47 home runs per season over a 4-game stretch after that. I know that's how it is in hindsight. People will look back and say the Red Sox made a major mistake. And to some degree, they did not bring him back, but I don't know if anybody could ever expected him to put up the numbers he has in Philadelphia. Now moving on to another free agent signing, and that is Edwin Diaz signing a 3-year, $69 million contract with the LA Dodgers. The Mets' last offer for Diaz was 3 years, $66 million with slight deferrals, but he ended up choosing the Dodgers instead. He had a 6-3 record last year with a 1.63 ERA, 28 saves, a .87 whip, and a 2.28 FIP for the Mets. The Dodgers made this move because their bullpen really struggled last year, and that's with them adding a lot last offseason. They added Kirby Yates and Tanner Scott in free agency to a bullpen that was already pretty good, that already had some good players like Michael Kopech and Blake Trinan. Kopech did miss a lot of the 2025 season with an injury, and then you also look at Blake Trinan, didn't produce as much as expected, and the same thing with Yates and Scott. Yates is now a free agent, 4-3 record last year with the Dodgers, a 5.23 ERA. With 3 saves, he's going to be turning 39 years old before the start of the 2026 season. And then you got Blake Trinan, who was 2-7 last year with a 5.4 ERA. But if you look at his numbers between 2021, 2022, and 2024, he did miss 2023 with an injury. But if you look at those 3 seasons, 21, 22, and 24, Trinan had a 1.96 ERA with a 2.12 ERA plus for the Dodgers. So 2025 was a down year and not one that the Dodgers expected, but they do hope he can bounce back next year. He did show some promise in the postseason. And then you look at Tanner Scott, he was a miss in year 1 so far for the Dodgers. A 1-4 record last year with a 4.74 ERA, 23 saves, and a 4.7 FIP. Still under contract for 3 more seasons, so hopefully he can bounce back, maybe as the 8th inning guy, and now Diaz will be the new closer for them. I do think Roki Sasaki leaves the bullpen where he was during the playoffs and jumps back into the starting rotation. But this Dodgers team is not afraid to spend, and I know a lot of people are going to be critical of them and how they've gone about their business in the last 5 years, getting guys in free agency and also via trade. But this team is very aggressive. They're dedicated to winning, and every single team has the ability to sign a free agent or trade for a guy. The Dodgers just sign the right pieces, and they're also a destination where players want to go because not only the Dodgers develop talent very well, but they also give you a chance to win a ring, and they have a really good winning culture there. And so that's why Diaz ended up choosing the Dodgers over the Mets. I know it's a big loss for the Mets, just like losing Pete Alonso, who just left on a 5-year, $155 million contract with the Baltimore Orioles. So the Mets lost Edwin Diaz and Pete Alonso on back-to-back days in free agency. 2 fan favorites out of Queens. Also, you add in Brandon Nimmo departing Queens via trade. You do look at this signing. This is a big loss here for this Mets lineup. This was a lineup that already needed more juice in the offseason, and now they just lost a big-time piece to their lineup. If you look at Alonso's career, he missed only 20 games over the last 5 seasons with the Mets. He had 264 total home runs hit with the Mets over his career, averaging 38 home runs and 102 RBIs per season, which is ridiculous, and that's a bet you really don't want to lose in your lineup. Last year, Alonso hit 38 home runs in 2025 with 126 RBIs, a .272 batting average, which was a career high, and also an .871 OPS, which was his best since his rookie year. This is a big loss for them, and now you got to really think about how are the Mets going to counter this and try to not only keep their fans happy, but also put a winning product on the field that could try to make the playoffs and not collapse like the Mets did last year. Kyle Tucker is still out there. I thought he was the best free agent available heading into free agency, and I still believe that. I think that ends up being their main focus, especially with now Brandon Nimmo being gone. There is a new outfield position open for him. Tucker hit 22 home runs with 73 RBIs and a .266 batting average last year with an .841 OPS and 25 stolen bases in 136 games for the Cubs. A very talented player, very capable of a 30-30 season if he stays healthy, and a guy you'd want in your lineup. I do like Kyle Tucker a lot. I would love to see the Red Sox sign him. I don't expect them to sign him unless they were to trade Jarren Duran and also Willie Abreu, but I do think the Mets will focus on trying to get him now in free agency. I think they're going to pivot, and that's going to be their main focus, is getting Kyle Tucker in a Mets uniform next to Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor. I think he ends up signing a 6-year deal with the New York Mets at $38.75 million per year, which would be $232.5 million overall. That's my prediction. 6 years, $232.5 million that Tucker signs with the New York Mets. And now moving on to my last thing I want to mention, and that's Tarik Skubal and the trade rumors around him right now. Left-handed pitcher for the Detroit Tigers, back-to-back Cy Young winner in the AL, coming off a 13-6 season with a 2.21 ERA, a .89 whip, 11.1 strikeouts per 9 innings, and a 2.45 FIP. The left-handed 29-year-old pitcher is a top player in the game of baseball, and as I said, won the Cy Young in the AL in back-to-back years. There is interest from the Dodgers to try to trade for him, which is not really a surprise to me at all. The Dodgers have the major league pieces and also the prospects to make a deal to go out and get Tarik Skubal. They could trade one of their top prospects and then pair it alongside Tyler Glasnow and maybe another major league player like Michael Kopech, for example, and go out and get Tarik Skubal with, maybe 2 or 3 of their top prospects being involved in that deal. He is going to be a free agent at the end of the 2026 season. Detroit may not want to pay him the $400 to $500 million that some teams are going to offer him in free agency. So I do expect them to probably trade him. I'm not sure if it will be before the season, but at some point, I do think Tarik Skubal will be traded. I would not be surprised to see the Dodgers go and get him, like I mentioned. The same thing with Kyle Tucker. I would not be surprised if the Dodgers went and offered Kyle Tucker a 4-year, $200 million deal and said, we'll give you $50 million a year if you come play for us. Short-term deal with not as much money as he maybe could get on another deal, but he'd have a high AAV in a contract with the Dodgers. I think Tarik Skubal is a guy they could go out and get as well. The Dodgers are very aggressive, so I would not be surprised to see them get either of those two guys. Skubal is the best player available in trade talks right now. And then you look at Kyle Tucker, he's the best player available right now in free agency, and I thought he was the best player available in free agency even before some guys have started to sign. Tarik Skubal, though, I would love to see the Red Sox go and make a trade for. I do not expect them to do so, but in the event you were to get him, you would have the best 1-2 punch in the game of baseball. When you have Tarik Skubal putting up 13-6 as a record with a 2.21 ERA, and you add that with a guy in Garrett Crochet who was 18-5 this past year with a 2.59 ERA, a 1.03 whip, and 11.2 strikeouts per 9 innings. That would be the best 1-2 punch in the game of baseball. Any 3-game series, any 5-game series, you would feel very confident with those guys on the mounds in the playoffs. If I'm the Red Sox, I would offer Jarren Duran, who I think will be traded. And at this point, I would probably trade Duran as well, even though it's difficult to do. I do think the Red Sox see him not really as a solution for the future. I think they don't really want to give him a long-term extension, so they're going to end up moving him, I believe. And you look at Willie Abreu, he's younger and under contract for more years. I think the Red Sox would be more willing to trade Duran than Abreu. If the Red Sox were to put a package together, though, for Tarik Skubal, I think this would have to be the offer. Jarren Duran, Christian Campbell, Marcelo Meyer, and Brian Bayo. I know it's a hefty offer, and he's also going to get a hefty contract as well. But the reality is he's been the best pitcher in the game of baseball for the last 3 seasons probably, and he's only 29 years old, and he's a lefty, and is coming off a really great season where he put up great numbers yet again. He's going to cost a lot, and I think in that deal, the Tigers would be adding 2 short pieces, one to their rotation in Brian Bayo, and then a good player to their outfielder, Jarren Duran, who was an all-star a couple years ago, who's going to add a lot of speed to your lineup. He can turn singles into doubles. Duran's an electrifying player, so I do expect teams to be interested in him via trade. You do look at right now, though, what that offer would have to be. I do think it would have to include Duran. I think Christian Campbell and Meyer would be the 2 pieces that are young players with a lot of upside and a lot of team control. That's why I think those 2 guys could be available in this trade. And then also you'd be adding Brian Bayo, who at the end of the day, at the very worst, is probably a number 3 in a rotation, could be a potential number 2 in a starting rotation. So they'd be getting another starting pitcher back in return with a good amount of team control on a pretty good contract, a team-friendly contract. You're getting Jarren Duran, who's on just a 1-year deal left, but a good player that you maybe could re-sign to a deal. And then you're also adding in 2 young players that were former top prospects at one point in Marcelo Meyer and Christian Campbell. I think that's what the offer would have to be. I do not expect the Red Sox to trade Connolly early. I don't know if they would trade Peyton Toley either. He was the guy I was going to maybe include over Brian Bayo. But I do think the Tigers, if they're trading Tarik Skubal, they're going to want a major league pitcher that has a little bit more experience and has been a little bit more proven at the major league level. And that's why I would expect them to maybe trade Brian Bayo in this deal rather than trade Peyton Toley. Anyways, that'll wrap up this episode. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to this. As always, I appreciate it. I hope you guys have a good one, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you.